And welcome to March 11th, 2019, Lake Bluff Board of Trustees meeting. Could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Ankerman.
Here.
Trustee Dewart.
Here.
Trustee Grenier.
Here.
Trustee Lemieux.
Here.
Trustee Meyer.
Here.
Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We have consideration of the minutes of the February 25th, 2019 Village Board meeting. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Okay, so moved by Ms. Ankerman. Do I have a second?
Second.
And second by Mr. Lemieux. Any additions, deletions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. At this point in the meeting, we allow 15 minutes for anyone to speak on something that is not on this evening's agenda. Do we have anybody that would like to do so? Sir, please, come on up. Thank you, Mr. Sakana.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Lee Sacknoff. My wife and I live at 629 Mountain. We've lived here for 30 years. We also have some investment properties here in Lake Bluff as well. We moved here because of the peace and tranquility. At one time, we actually lived on a farm, and we found this to be one of the most pleasant places that we'd come across. Tremendous sense, we're now here 30 years, and we're here basically because of the sense of community. And I want to thank everyone on the board. I want to thank Kathy, the rest of the crew, and the people that preceded you to make this such a wonderful place, because we're going to continue to stay. But I'm here on behalf of neighbors and a couple environmental groups, and this is regarding what would appear to be a first world problem. And maybe it's snickerable, but it's about leaf blowers, and it's about gas-powered leaf blowers in particular. And this all happened last fall when I was talking with one of my neighbors. The conversation had to stop because of the starting up of leaf blower. And this has happened, and once I started networking with other people and talking about how you just can't hear yourself think in the middle of spring, summer, and fall because of the leaf blowers, a lot of people had been starting to network. And unbeknownst to me, there are several organizations, environmental organizations, one in particular, Green Minds out of Lake Bluff, Lake Forest. Another one that I'm involved with, that I just got involved with for several reasons, including this, is Lake County Green Congregations. And I then came across Pam Russell, who's not here today. She's out, and we both submitted letters, also a petition and a packet of information to Drew a couple weeks ago. And I think coming up, you're going to see this packet regarding the leaf blower situation. And at first, it may seem relatively minor. It's certainly not up there with opioids, but it's a pretty significant issue. Here's the problem. The first one is noise. We can't even hear ourselves think many times. I'm on my front porch trying to get a snooze in, and I'm awakened by the leaf blowers. I've heard some of our neighbors that have little children said that they're waking up in the middle of the day when their kids are awakened by the leaf blowers. I might add, there's no restrictions currently on the books where you can't have 2, 3, or 4 leaf blowers running simultaneously on a lot. And that lot could be as small as a quarter of an acre. You say, well, why would there be that many out there? Well, for the efficiencies of the services, they're going to come in and out and blow those leaves as fast as possible. A quarter of the population, of the adult population in the United States, from age 20 to 69, are now having deficit problems with hearing. It's an all-time high. It's usually associated with environment. Of course, a subsection of that would be things such as leaf blowers. Now, the bigger issue, however, is the pollution. Now, the technology behind a two-stroke engine that runs a leaf blower is pretty old, and the regulations have not kept up with it. And I'll give you a couple facts real quickly. OVC, which is your volatile chemicals that are emitted, essentially smog, currently there's 124 times higher for a leaf blower than there is for a truck or car, 124 times. I'm going to give you one that's even more mind-boggling, and that's 60,000. Benzene, which is a carcinogen. 60,000 times the safe level in each cubic meter that's emitted. This isn't 60, 600, or 6,000, it's 60,000. 1 hour, just to put your arms around this thing, 1 hour of a gas-powered blower that's used in the community, and they're not normally electric, and it would be great if we all used electric or battery-operated in some form, or a rake would even be better, is equal to 250 miles driven in a Toyota, a standard car, and they use the Toyota as a benchmark. Now, when that Toyota goes 250 miles, it's spreading its pollution over 250 miles. You're sitting and wallowing in a quarter-acre lot. The noise is one thing, but you're breathing in carcinogens, and a lot of carcinogens at that. A couple examples of where we stand in technology in this country. In the latest models, jet turbines that are coming out with the new Boeings and GE jet engines, they're 80% more fuel efficient than the 1950s. The power plants burning natural gas today, which are replacing coal fire, have reduced emissions by 50%. And we're not even dealing with solar, and we're not dealing with wind, which of course are significantly a quantum jump in efficiency over what the natural gas fired power plants are. Here's even a more significant piece of information. Smog-causing emissions from cars are 99% lower than they were in 1950. So what's happening with these gas-powered equipment, the two-stroke engines that do these blowers? It's really we're not keeping up with it. You know, I'm going to conclude by saying that I often hear in the community, we live in a bubble. You know, the first time I heard it, and then I realized, you know, we live in this Norman Rockwell environment that's so perfect. I think someone told me recently they saw a bumper sticker that said, I don't live in the real world, I live in Lake Bluff, you know. And I just don't want my bubble to be polluted. I don't want to be contained in that bubble and having noise pollution, and more importantly, the carcinogens and the other pollutants that are coming out of these machines. We have restrictions on the book, and I think that's very good. But to give you an idea, other communities along the North Shore, in Lincolnshire, or Lincoln Wood, Evanston, Winnetka, Wilmette, Highland Park, and Glencoe have tightened up their restrictions on this. There's over 100 communities in the United States right now that have either banned or increased the restrictions on these blowers. So I take it very seriously. I want this community to remain healthy. I want it to remain quiet as it possibly can be within sensible range. So I want to thank you for the time you've given me. I want you to consider when you get your packet coming up in April that you look at this in a very serious vein, and I appreciate that in a couple weeks, hopefully we'll have spring, and unfortunately with that comes the leaf blower season. So hopefully you'll be able to do something to help us out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. Normally, we don't, usually, we just listen to people's, you know, comments or concerns, but I will say that I believe that this is going to be an agenda item in an upcoming COW meeting, probably sometime in April or something. We will look at that. The one thing that caught me by surprise, I thought that we had a restriction on the number of leaf blowers on a lot. So that's what we were just looking at, but we don't, and I thought we
I
did.
did, I thought it was 2.
Yeah.
It was changed about 2 years ago.
Okay,
Really? Okay, so
And
there
the
is
hours
not
got
much.
more narrow.
okay.
So,
And the restrictions,
Yeah.
okay.
so that was an eye-opener for me.
We're just getting on the winter and we want to sit outside and we're not going to be able to.
Well, we will definitely, as I said, it will be a topic of discussion at a committee of the whole meeting there. I'm not sure where it will go, but it will definitely be on the books.
With you a long time ago, I remember, and you didn't like it either.
Can't hear it. Okay,
Thanks
well,
for the, also suggesting, look at what some of the other communities have done. I think that'll be really helpful.
Every one of them except for Lake Forest.
okay.
And
Well,
that's how they are.
all right, well, we will be, just to let you all know, we will be looking at it, and thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, no one else? So we have the village finance report. Okay, this is the warrant report for March 1 through 15, 2019, and February 2019 payroll expenditures. We have expenditures of village funds for payment of invoices in the amount of $348,611.68 for March 1 through 15. We have expenditures of village funds for payroll in the amount of $322,615.05 for February, which totaled expenditures of $671,226.73. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Okay, so that was so moved by, was that Mr. Dewart?
Yes,
And
sorry.
second by Mr. Meyer?
Yep.
Okay, are there any concerns or questions or any queries to our finance director? All right, hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Ankerman? Aye. Trustee Dewar?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
All right, village administrators report.
Just one item. The most recent newsletter that went out, and this is our best communication tool pursuant to the results of our most recent survey of our residents, had an article in there regarding Smart 911. And the village has been working with its contractual dispatch provider, the Village View Department of Public Safety, regarding this effort. And we have started asking folks to start to sign up for this Smart 911. The article is a little bit incorrect. It says later in 2019, we're gonna switch away from Code Red, which is our current reverse 911 provider. But we're gonna do this a lot sooner. So you're gonna start to see a mad push on Smart 911 communication. We put a blip in the e-newsletter last week and did some social media post about it. And I don't want to throw our good friends in the village of Glenview under the bus, but I think we have just a tick fewer of users already signed up for Smart 911 in a community that's significantly larger than us. We're already doing pretty well with signing up, but we're going to see a mad push of marketing. And I wanted to start, and when we had a couple folks in the room, I wanted them to hear this. And so Deputy Chief Matt Smazinski is going to fill us in on Smart 911.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate the lead-in. We are working with our partners in Glenview and some of the other surrounding communities to implement and completely roll out the Smart 911 system. This is going to be the landing page for Smart 911. And why this is important is any of these icons down here, as you can see, from our safety profile to alerts and notifications to vulnerable needs and registry. And what that means is you yourself or anyone, or if you have a family member, can enroll in this. And what that allows for, if a 911 call is placed from either that cell phone or that landline, the dispatch center is going to receive some additional information. However, that information is going to be up to you to put into the system to whatever amount of that information you want to put into it. It could be something as simple as your name, other additional contact information, all the way up to your service providers for medications, your doctor, even to if there's a specific ambulatory service that you require given some of your needs. Why this will also help us, it will allow us to be able to notify you in case there is an emergency. Let's say, like our reverse 911 that we had before with Code Red, you would have received a text notifications or a phone call with a recorded message from us. And this is basically the next generation of that product. So what we'll be doing is in the next few weeks here, we have a very tight deadline, which we found out today, of April 1st. So before then, you're going to be receiving a big media blitz about this. And for you, and if you have any special elderly folks or neighbors or anyone, that we're trying to get them on board with the program as quickly as possible.
I have one question. I waded into this, and I understand that, you know, what you said about you can enter as much or as little as you want, but can you talk about the data security? Because, you know, if you provide what they ask for, it's a lot of tender data, including, you know, maybe you've got a disability, so you're in the wrong hands. That's obviously information that you might not want someone else to know.
Absolutely, and it is a concern. I think that was where some of the apprehension may have been with this product. So two parts to that is that, one, you can provide as little as you'd like.
Okay.
Or two, with the security features that is basically the same compliance as the FBI, as the police, it's CJIS compliant.
Okay.
So it's very secure, but it's also secure in the sense that it does not get broadcasted unless you dial 911.
Okay.
So if you were to actually push that 911 button, then that information comes out of your phone in your service and then is provided. It cannot go like a reverse dig into the system to take it out.
Okay. Very good. I think, Drew, maybe that needs to be something that's part of our publicity thing.
Yeah, I think some of the communities have been struggling for the very issue of
Yeah.
privacy. And I mean, it's not asking for any financial information.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
just even that, say
This is
you've
how it
got a
works,
bad
mechanics
knee or
of it.
something, or
Yeah.
you're wheelchair bound or
Yeah.
something.
HIPAA stuff that we
Yeah.
put in there.
Absolutely.
So I think what you've told me makes me feel a lot more comfortable about it.
I mean, yeah, you could even put your pets, you could even, if you have your
Right.
pets, the
Pets
names
information.
and what everything else could be put on there. How many, because I've already done so, put that on there, how many of our residents do you have an idea have done so
So
already?
currently, as of today,
Right.
to our knowledge, over 300 have associated themselves with Lake Bluff. As Drew mentioned, it's, Glenview, I think, was just barely above us, so we're doing good for our numbers initially. But our anticipation is to reach out through either even handouts to the other homeowners associations to provide as much notification and get as much data as possible to get this rolling out.
Okay, good.
And that's, I mean, that's, the good news, bad news is with any community's reverse notification, we're only as good as the data that our residents are willing to give us, right? So whether it be code red, that was also an elective, we weren't automatically signing people up. We have databases that we are going to put into this, but it's not as good as people putting their best numbers. And we have, like our water billing database, but that's, I mean, some of these are, people that haven't changed a number, maybe a landline, and this is not the best, most contemporary way to communicate with the residents. So, we're hopeful that a lot of people get on board with this. This is, I don't know, Matt, if you can talk about how, like, the portability of this, where it's,
Absolutely. So let's say you are out visiting another locale, even including Chicago. So if you're commuting down to Chicago and you're going back and forth to Lake Bluff, you can also set those notifications, because Chicago is a partner with Smart 911, that if you were in the city, you would, one, be able to receive notifications, but two, their dispatch centers could also receive your information. So if you were in a situation, you're down in the city somewhere, you're trapped, you can dial 911, and that dispatch center will get a lot more information, including very fine point GPS. That's very important in the city, because sometimes it's more difficult. That you have that option is a little bit safer than just kind of dialing 911 on its own. It gives that dispatch center a little more information about who the caller is, even if you cannot speak.
So a couple of questions. To the one the element you just pointed out, the geographic scope of this, you said includes Chicago. Beyond that, it says 45 million people nationwide. So is this all of Illinois? Is it just the Chicago metropolitan area, and then maybe St. Louis and Indianapolis and Milwaukee? I mean, how is this
Going everywhere.
raid?
Yeah, so this is moving outward. It is, I believe it's been about 10 years since the product has been live. So their footprint is growing. It has, the exact locations I couldn't tell you outside of Chicago. Some of our other neighbors like Wilmette, Winnetka, Kenilworth, DuPage County, I believe is rolling out
Is this
as well.
Lake County wide?
Lake County, I'm not aware of countywide.
Okay,
But again, with our consolidated dispatch center, there's quite a few agencies right there.
yeah.
And then as this product becomes a little more viable or a little more available, that we can see if it expands.
Maybe Ms. Hart can help to expand on the scope of that. Two other questions. What's the significance of April the 1st?
That was when our contractual agreement with Code Red ended.
Okay.
So, yeah, we were confirming that, and we confirmed it today, that was in fact the last day that we were operating that through Glenview.
Okay.
So that's why we're sort of very aggressively pushing to get
So
that
in
information
order
out.
to continue a relatively high level of dispatch quality and hands-on quality, we want to move on this as quickly as possible.
So this is already implemented. It's just, this is the complete rollout.
It's just up to us to embrace it.
Correct.
And then from a mechanical standpoint, so I call 911, and so the public service officer, police officer, EMS, fire team, all of them would have access to this information?
So
Who
they
does, who
themselves-
doesn't?
Sure, absolutely. So they themselves would not, but it would be coming through the dispatch center.
That's what I mean, yeah, yeah.
Correct. So that information would be available to you, to any public safety sector that would be responding to your needs.
Okay,
So that could either be in an EMS situation, police, both, whatever it may be.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. If, so I want to sign myself up for this, and I'm nervous about how much information I put in there. Is there a guidance in there as to what is critical information for you as opposed to optional?
Sure. So a lot of it, even in and of itself, if you just sign up, right? The fact that it has your name associated with it, it has your GPS locations associated with it.
Right.
Even that base information is very useful to us.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Because it also allows us then to send a reverse message to you in the event there was any sort of notification that we need to reach you for. With that on there, you can receive those notifications because we have that basic data
Yeah.
that you are a member. Your information on your medical or anything that would not be obviously pushed out if there was a reverse
Right.
call being made, it would just be having your number information.
Okay, well, I guess I just want to make, if I wanted to put on there only what was really, you know, I decided was valuable enough to put on there. Again, let's assuming I'm nervous about how much is on there. I just want to make sure there's something on there that helps guide me. What is really critical for you?
So like
At least get
name,
that on there.
absolutely, so name,
Right.
any sort of relevant phone numbers,
Right. Contact information.
contact information, next of kin information. If there was, like, we're trying to reach someone to tell them, hey, we
Can't find you. or-
can't find, right, or you're in a medical situation where you're not able to respond verbally, that there is some that we can possibly contact to help us try to.
Okay. Good, thanks.
Anybody else have any questions?
The only thing I would add to this, Kathy, is that
Yeah.
the other communities in our area, the Lake Forest, Kenilworth, Wilmette, all of them are pushing at the same time. So the people are going to get bombarded with this, so.
Thank you, Chief,
It'll
very
be
much. No, I
ubiquitous.
think it's very worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I hope it gets out there, and I hope everyone else tells people. And the other thing is, if you have, and I think you've already brought it up, if anyone has elderly neighbors or things that perhaps that would be really, really helpful to have, please tell them, because they may not sometimes get all the other information out there. All right, village attorney's report.
Just a brief announcement. You should have all received our save the date for our biennial seminar for all of our municipal officials. Hopefully it didn't get caught in any spam, but the date is May 2nd, Thursday, May 2nd. It'll be at Ravinia this year, so conveniently located. And again, it's a great opportunity for, not only for us to give you all updates on legal matters and legislative and case law matters, but also for you to network with other municipal officials, both on the North Shore in Cook County and DuPage, about best practices and other things that you're all trying to deal with, particularly given all the legislation that's moving through Springfield that is going to impact a lot of municipal operations. So you'll be getting more information about that, but I just want to make sure you have it on your schedules.
Okay, well, that is a great segue into what I want to talk tonight at the village president's report. Last Tuesday, I had the extreme fun of driving down to Springfield and spent the day with several other mayors from Lake County, meeting with various elected state representatives and state senators, including the head of the Senate, John Cullerton, and the head of the House, John Madigan, about various issues that are specific interest and concern to municipalities and how they will affect it. One of the things, of course, is the intrusion of the state upon our sales tax revenues that we have received. And the last couple of years, they have infringed upon it. Originally 2%, it's now down to 1% of our sales tax that they are taking. And they also have what they call administrative cost for distributing the money back to it. What used to be the state was supposed to be a pass-through for certain amounts of money. Now they're taking an administrative cost. So it is reducing the amount of money that we receive, which of course then impacts our budgets. That's of concern if this continues, if they ask any more. It seems that they are saying, and hopefully they'll keep it, that they're not planning on taking any more. And it will gradually, if a certain bill is passed through the legislature, that by 2023, we would be getting back the normal amount of money that we used to get. Whether or not any of that happens, I don't know. It's in a state of flux, really. Spent interesting time, had spent a half hour with Speaker Madigan, which is really unusual. He must have had a dull day. But we talked about quite a lot of things. One of the things, of course, that interests all of us is a capital bill for infrastructure. There has not been a state capital bill for 10 years at all to fund any types of infrastructure that is needed not only at the state level, but also at our municipal level. And every time that we brought this up, he kept saying, well, you know, we are $3 billion shortfall in terms of balancing the budget. I was there for a half hour, and he had to say that at least 6 times, which would lead the skeptical me to think that there will be no capital bill coming out of there, which is really a tremendous concern for us as we look at our infrastructure and the crumbling roads, you know, stormwater management. I could go on and on and on. You know, maybe it's going to happen, but I sure did not leave feeling very comfortable that there's going to be a capital bill that's coming out of there this year at all. The other thing, of course, are the pension funds, and all of us are pushing for some consolidation of pension funds to have a more realistic and more efficient way of handling the increasing cost to the municipalities for increasing pension costs that we must pay into. The other thing of particular interest to many of us that were going down there, and specifically somebody like me who's a retired school principal, is the pending legalization of marijuana as for recreational use. We certainly have medical marijuana and looking towards decriminalization. My concern is how it's going to be controlled. I think the bill's going to happen. I think that's a given, regardless of what anybody may or may not think. It's going to happen. What we are hoping for is that it's going to slow down, because it's all over the board now, and in the meetings that several of us North Shore mayors have had with the representatives that are proposing this, when we ask for some answers and some things, they don't know. Oh, we'll figure that out. That's the motto. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. But some of the things that are being listed is that they are looking at this point now to have what they call a free market. We had been hoping that it could be regulated basically on the same terms that we regulate liquor, where our local municipalities personally, as fits our communities, decide how, when, where, and why. That may not be happening, as they are talking about just a free open market. We're not sure what that looks like. We're hoping that they're going to slow down on that. The other thing that disturbs me personally is the emphasis that you will be able to grow X amount of personal pot plants in your home. If you're dealing with kids and you're dealing with that, and the freedom that happens for children to get access to some of this very easily, and you have absolutely no local control over any of that. That is, and I'm preaching a little bit here, but I'm sorry, that's a personal concern to me. And I think to others is because you have no control over that. It's going to happen, I think that's a given, but what we're asking for as mayors on the whole area here is we're asking that we have municipal controls over how we deal with it within our specific communities. So I'm going back down again with a different group of mayors next week for 2 days of talks and continuing and trying to push what we consider to be important for our municipalities. And that ends my report. So we now have acceptance of the correspondence. Please note all correspondence was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees and the informational reports on February 8th, 15th, 22nd, and March 1st. Do I have a motion to approve the correspondence?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Lemieux. Do I have a second?
Second.
And second by Mr. Grenier. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we go down to number 11, which is a resolution, adopting the village's thematic landscape identity, gateway, and corridor plan. Over the last 10 months, and at the direction of the village board, the SEC has worked with a diverse group of community stakeholders to prepare a thematic landscape identity, gateway, and corridor plan think sometimes we call it the playbook, for the village. The plan documents Lake Bluff's existing landscape identity, purposes future plantings and treatments, and applies these plantings and treatments to the Route 176 corridor. The preparation of the plan was contemplated when the SEC was originally established, and the plan is consistent with the multiple goals of the village's 2023 strategic plan. At its March 4th, 2019 meeting, the SEC unanimously recommended the village board adopt the plan. A resolution to that effect has been prepared for the board's consideration. At the same meeting, the SEC requested the village board allocate resources to Project A as proposed in the plan's list of next steps and priority projects, which is on page 27 of the report, which is 80-some pages, I believe, which consist of frontage enhancements along Route 176 adjacent to the Lake Bluff Golf Course. The plan's consultants estimate the preparation of detailed landscape plans, including budgetary costs, would total $12,000. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Meyer, thank you. And a second?
Second.
A second by Mrs. Ankerman. All right, Glenn, do you have, before we ask for any comments and stuff from the trustees, you have a presentation? Or does
Certainly. I want to
or
describe it as
Mr. Renner, the chairman, does he have, or maybe it's a dynamic duo?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good.
Mr. Renner's the dynamic one. I'm just the duo.
Okay.
Certainly, I wouldn't call it a presentation, but wanted to at least provide a brief overview of the plan of our process getting here. Leave the balance of time for questions, for comments. So as you remember, about a year ago, the village board requested that the Sustainability and Community Enhancement Ad Hoc Committee do this study. It's always been part of the plan to do this at a certain point. So the village, we retained Tesca Associates and then Landscape Artistry, our local Cliff Miller, to do really a planning process that looked at essentially three parts. One, what's here in the village today. Two, what should be in the village. What are some treatments we can use for screening, for intersections, for gateways and entries into the village. And then finally, three, to take these pieces, to take these building blocks and apply them at a conceptual level to Route 176, which has always been, certainly one of the most prominent corridors in our village. Always a topic of discussion, always an area of interest for visitors. So in the playbook, I'm just going to go down through a lot of the documentation to some of the sketches proposed for 176. Some of the common treatments it recommends that you can see in 176 is first this idea of, having some common visual themes. One of those is the idea of using split rail fence that already exists in a few different locations in the village, continuing that through the corridor, using drifts of native grasses, forbs, things that are, again, native to northeastern Illinois, salt tolerant, weather tolerant, don't require the same maintenance needs as perennials and structured things of that nature. And then also, one of the big things proposed by this plan isn't really the introduction of something new, but rather the removal of something old, which is considerable elimination of buckthorn in this corridor and really throughout the village. As you may be aware, Lake County has set a goal to eradicate buckthorn at a county-wide level, and they're investing considerable resources in doing that in Lake County forest preserves. So this plan is consistent with that theme, talks about the removal of buckthorn in many of these corridors and areas. You may have noticed that Lake Bluff Open Lands Association did some work in this northern section in doing some of that removal in 2018. That looks great. Certainly, it always, as you know, I'm still relatively new to this community, and so it's almost, you have to think for a sec to look and say, oh, there's a golf course right there. Because when you were driving down that road a short time ago, you wouldn't have been able to see it through all the bush. So, which is interesting. There's a couple sketches in here that I think tell the story of what the vision is for this corridor as well. This idea of having this natural transition from pavement to a mown lawn, which is, again, gives you nice sight lines, gives you a reasonable amount of maintenance on a periodic level, then going further away into these fences, into these natural drifts, into these tree groupings. I'm trying to present just something that balances these many users, presents an aesthetically pleasing set of layers as you move from the inside out in the corridor. And most of all, it's just something that's reasonable. It's reasonable to obtain, reasonable to put into place, and reasonable to maintain for the long term. So a couple last notes I would say on the plan. One is a big area of emphasis is valuing the contribution of our volunteer partners, of other landowners with frontage in the corridor, such as Jawa, such as Mariani Landscaping, to participate in trying to see this vision become a reality in the corridor. And then the second is really the plan. At the last stage of our planning, we really took a moment to really lay out what would be the roadmap for the next few steps of how to implement this. I think a comment that was repeated often was this idea that this plan should not sit on the shelf, that we really need to have the momentum towards seeing some of these things put into place incrementally. So that's the idea behind projects A, B, and C, which respectively look at the north side of 176 west of Viva Terrace, the north side of 176 east of Viva Terrace, often called the corner, and then continuing on into gateway treatments into where these building blocks can be used outside the 176 corridor, within the village. So I think that's a high-level overview.
Yeah, to tie into that last point about the building blocks beyond this project, when we talk about a playbook, we first started with Lake Bluff Open Lands coming and talking about an area of 176, and we really got into this expanded idea of what are the types of trees, what are the types of plantings that we should use all over the village, what are appropriate, native to this area that work with our environment, our climate, what's going to work in the future. So really by developing this plan, we're helping to set the stage for all over the village. If we decide to do another particular street, we can go back to this planning guide, these planning lists, these tree lists, and go back to this as a thematic element, but also as a sustainable element, because the SEC has that intersection of both sustainability and beautification, and this is a perfect example of that. I think this was a great example of community involvement. It started with a volunteer community organization. It came to the board, it came to the SEC. We have the professional landscapes, and there was a series of meetings. Public comment was extensive, and it really helped develop this. I think if you've seen the public comments, there was just a lot of great information, particularly from George Russell, our former village engineer, did a fantastic job in providing a lot of information, especially where things are buried along the roadway. But to know...
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
As long as there's no bodies.
Yes, no. We won't go back to the school. So there's a lot of great features in this, and in taking this to the next step, which is what the SEC recommended, is to do the formal landscape design specifically so that it can then be implemented in a phased implementation plan. The landscape plan that they will develop will include cost estimates of various elements. Because we need to know as we tackle parts of this project, the village needs to know what's it going to cost, what years should we put it in, which parts of the community might volunteer and provide resources so that the village does not have to expend funds, what part you might want to get in the following fiscal year's budgets. So that was something the SEC asked for, not just a landscape plan, but budget estimates as part of it.
Good, thank you. Any questions from the trustees?
It's a good report. I compliment you on bringing what I imagine is a very opinionated group of people together and coming up with a plan that seems, at least on the emails that were in our board package, to have a surprising uniformity of approval. So, good work.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I find it very attractive. Just to clarify a couple of things, Project A, which is is north side of 176, or is it both sides of 176?
Both sides to Eva Terrace.
Okay, all right, because
I know it was a little
that's what this looks like. It's not what the document pointed out. So, at one time, it was my understanding that the primary focus, next step, was going to be the Green Bay 176 intersection. And we seem to have departed from that. That's one comment. The other is the very attractive portion of 176 from Green Bay Road east to the viaduct, particularly on the south side of the road, is absent from this corridor. So can you address whatever happened to the priority for the, you know, to me, as I mentioned to Drew earlier, I've cut down a sizable amount of buckthorn over the years and painted a lot of that nasty stuff to try to kill it. Yet, as a number of people have said, but it's green. And if, in looking at prioritizing this, we have some of the other areas are like maybe not quite as, to many people, are not quite as attractive as what we've already gained on the stretch between the UP tracks, Green Bay Road. I mean, where we are today is vastly better than where we were a few years ago, and on both sides of the road, in my opinion, with the partnership of everybody here.
So there are two questions there, I
Yeah.
think. I remember the discussions even when I was on the village board about Green Bay, and there were a lot of studies done back in the day about different elements for that. I think what brought us to this process was the original offer of volunteerism from Lake Bluff Open Lands to do a certain section of 176.
Okay.
And that came for a request because they had volunteers ready, they'd done a lot of work, they'd done a lot of planning, and it kind of came back to, and the village board was involved with this, let's get a playbook together to make sure that we just don't tackle certain areas that we've got an idea of what would work. So that kind of led it from that direction. Certainly the Green Bay intersection is part of this. We would love to have that funded, that design as well, but we understand that, you know, maybe this should be done in, you know, funding phases. And going Green Bay, going any parts of the major road, Sheridan, whatever, into the village, I think this is a great first step, because once this plan's developed, you say, okay, what about this area? We've got a theme and a playbook to apply to that area, and we can just move forward with another design for that part of the village. So that, the second part of your question is, why not this area or that area? That's certainly up to the board in terms of priorities, but we feel this is also a great entryway into the town as well to focus on.
It should be said too, if I may add, you know, as again, thinking about the focus this planning process had on these building blocks, I mean, we've already are seeing that some of these community organizations are taking it and running with it. So the Lake Bluff Garden Club is working through plans to sort of revitalize, if you would, Washington Park, just a few blocks north of here. I think we'll look, as the SEC had a final proposal to do that at our April meeting, and they have already incorporated some of the plant listings, some of the recommendations of this into how they're looking at how to do that parcel. And so again, trying to make sure we have this really strong framework to build on took, I would say, probably the bulk of the time in the planning process.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Maybe you can sort of describe the nature of the discussion I'm sure you had, and we got some comments about these too, the debate between do you put mowed grass in or don't you put mowed grass? Can you kind of characterize some of the thinking that you went through that led to the decision or the recommendation that you've made?
Sure. So if we're trying to get to a best of both worlds approach here. So of course we want a near the roadway. We want you know, clear sight lines. We want something that's not intimidating for pedestrians or too much of a pest harborage, things like that. But we still wanted to have areas that needed less maintenance, that were more reflective of you know, some of the native plant history of northeastern Illinois, and so that's just the compromise here. There's a few feet of, and actually a couple pages down illustrates this very nicely. So you have mown lawn right here past the swale as you're near the roadway where you need to have that clear line of sight to vehicles. Then we're getting into these higher grasses, perennials, forms, but still relatively constrained in height around that fence element. We go to the North Shore Bike Path, again, 3 feet clear space on either side that will be mowed and maintained. And then past that, you get really into some of the taller elements of the corridor.
Yeah,
So just a
it did look to me
compromise.
that some of that had a practical aspect to it, obviously, right around paved surfaces, especially where bicycles and things, you want to have some safety zone in there, and grass makes sense. It looked to me like that's exactly what you did. I was just kind of curious, was trying to come up with some sort of balance, because I know there are people who've looked at it, gee, it'd really be great if we could avoid that mowed grass thing, and it seems like you have limited it just to, I said, the practical aspects, and that seems to make sense.
And that was one of the comments George brought up, and was about sightlines and
Sightlines.
safety, which I think you have to have some of those elements, but you try and minimize them.
Okay, good, nice work.
Anybody else from the board? Well, I want to thank everybody, and the whole genesis for the beginning of the SEC actually goes back to at one time when I was early as president of this board, there was some controversy on what did we want the four corners, what did we want that landscape to look like as the entryway into there, and there were several different and some heated things. And frankly, I did not feel like playing Solomon with these different groups. So one of the reasons, certainly was not the only reason, the whole environmental thing, but I thought that a committee, which we needed, I thought very strongly for sustainability, beautification, environmental issues we needed in the village, it was time, and that I would simply ask them to solve the problem. So to help with that, to be able to do that in a way that encompasses what everybody working together. That's what I really wanted. And I think that has happened. I think it has worked where everybody has worked together. I think everybody's been respected, where that is. Certainly in terms of, the mode area, which is primarily for sightlines, and especially up at Green Bay Road when you get the kids and the bikes and the school and the summer and all of that, and around other areas, that's what that is for. But then the whole idea of the natural, native aspects that we want to promote. Split rail fence, which I think is lovely, expensive but lovely, and I mean, that really defines the areas too. But I think the key word here is playbook, because you can use all of these things, not just as you were saying, Mark, all the rest of the areas. These can be taken and done. This is not going to sit on the shelf. People have invested a tremendous amount of time and energy in this. I think it's for us, a really great plan that works together, that everyone can embrace. And so I would like us to move on this step by step, incrementally. We haven't budgeted anything yet, but all that's going to start to come. So it is not going to sit on the shelf. It is going to move forward. And I think that honors people from the past who were extremely instrumental in starting things with the open lands and everything else. And I'm looking here at Sandy and her mom, Carolyn Getz, who 40-some years ago, and I was a young teenager, I remember, and she was passionate, and she was actually for many years a lone voice, and then it all picked up. So I would hope that your mother would be very pleased with what is happening, where the whole community actually, I think, has gotten together. And
Very much so, and I've written a little something as far as, maybe
okay, we'll come.
this was one of her missions.
So I appreciate everybody's hard work, Open Lands, the Garden Club, all the SEC. I expect you all to continue your great work, and all that does is benefit this village and who we are.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Thank
Can you ask them to raise $3 million to take the,
Yeah, we're looking at, now the next step is, how do you get those ugly power lines down
Yeah,
and
that's
stuff?
a
Which is
challenge.
Those are
several million
historic.
dollars, and so we're kind of looking at maybe a few bake sales or something. But that might be, we know they're there. We're looking at some millions, but, once you begin something like this, you don't stop. You begin looking at the next steps and what we could be doing. So this is obviously going to take time and years, but I think you guys have set a wonderful playbook and things for us to do. So, thank you. Very,
What
very, very-
happens to the North Shore catenary towers?
You mean the rusting steel structures?
Those things.
Yes. We're organizing a paint sale. We're gonna get out there.
We'll call them historic, shall I? We're
Yeah,
gonna get the
yeah.
other things, whatever. But, yeah, but.
I think we have discussed it, and I think it's something we're investigating with them, because we talked about, I'm sorry to extend
No,
this.
go ahead.
About burying, electric lines for a long time when I was on the board, but those structures themselves are just horrendous. And we don't know if the lines are active, we don't know if those towers could be sandblasted and
Right.
painted, or there may be some intermediate thing
Yeah.
that we can look at.
They actually, I'm gonna throw this out there, they may actually, might look interesting if they
They're
were,
kind of cool.
Yeah,
if they were restored perhaps.
I'm not sure
I
how
don't know,
everybody
that may
else
be a
feels
stupid
about
idea.
Well, it's something to pursue.
Kind of a history kind of guy. They're kind of cool.
Okay.
The
Sell
North
them.
Shore Railroad ran through
Light
there,
standards.
and the
We
old
use them
towers
in their-
that powered the.
I know, and the last train ran in January 1963, so I know how it goes. We know, I have a first and a second, or do I already have that, don't I?
Yeah.
So now I need a roll call vote.
We can do that.
Okay, great.
Trustee Dewar.
Aye.
Trustee Grenier.
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Inkman. Aye.
All right, we go now to number 12, which is a resolution authorizing the execution of a construction contract for the Village of Lake Bluff's FY 2020 Portland Cement Concrete, PCC, sidewalk replacement project. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Ankerman, and a second.
I'll second.
And second by Mr. Grenier. Village of Lake Bluff, through the Municipal Partnering Initiative, joined with the cities of Highland Park and Lake Forest and the villages of Glencoe, Lincolnwood, and Winnetka to jointly bid the concrete street curbs and sidewalk work for all 5 municipalities. The Village of Lake Bluff's scope of work includes the annual sidewalk replacement work in the village. 2 bids were received for the project. The lowest bid for the joint project was submitted by Schroeder and Schroeder Incorporated, Skokie, with the amount attributable to Lake Bluff's portion of the work at the price of $28,570. A comparison to the unit prices the village received for the FY19 sidewalk, 2019 sidewalk replacement program shows that the prices of the current bid are approximately 28% lower than the prior year. The village's proposed FY 2020 budget includes $35,000 for the miscellaneous sidewalk replacement work. It's recommended that the quantities of sidewalk to replace be increased, and that the village board approve a contract with Schroeder and Schroeder for up to the budgeted amount of $35,000. Schroeder and Schroeder has successfully completed numerous concrete sidewalk replacement projects for the village in the past. The village engineer is recommending that the award be made to Schroeder and Schroeder Incorporated in the total low bid amount of $35,000. Any questions or comments for our village engineer?
Do we have these sidewalks identified, or is
Not
that
yet.
something
No,
to be
I do a lot
done?
of walking in April,
Okay,
and we
all right.
pick them up.
Would that walkthrough influence whether we wanted to spend all 35,000 or not?
We can spend 35,000. We can. I mean, the thing that I've been cutting every year as I run a budget is some of the center boulevard, those end caps of the boulevard where
Yeah.
people walk in the middle and then go through. Those have been cut a couple of years in a row as I've filled up the budget elsewhere, so that might get in then this year. You know, I put out a quantity that I think will cost $35,000. We just got a good bid this year, so the
Yeah.
bid price was lower. But the intent is to try to keep
So-
that investment at
So you're saying you
35.
have plenty of things that you
We can find
could
them,
do
yes.
because you're gonna do them anyway, it's a matter of timing.
And this winter was particularly brutal. There's been some heaving of some walks. They're like, oh, that's new.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
got a
The other
lot of
thing we do
walkways
in this
under-
contract is some curb and gutter work.
Yeah, right.
We did some driveways in the industrial park that were particularly broken last year.
Was it last year that we saw the big bump in the cost of concrete?
Last year, our
years.
price went way up. We were bidding it by ourselves each year, and
Mm-hmm.
that prompted me to go back to the MPI this year, and then the prices came back down.
Good
Yeah.
idea, thank you
Yeah.
for doing that.
Yes, I guess I'd prefer to look at it as we're recovering some of the lost, truly some of the lost project work that we could have done last year.
Yeah, and we did get Schroeder, and Schroeder's done a good job, so I was happy with that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Trustee Grenier.
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Inkman. Aye. Trustee Dewar.
Aye.
All right, number 13 is a resolution authorizing change order number 1 for the village's FY 2019 street resurfacing improvement project. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Dewart. Second?
Second.
Second,
Lemieux.
Mr. Lemieux.
Thank you. On April 23rd, 2018, the village board approved a resolution authorizing the execution of a construction contract with Peter Baker and Son Company of Lake Bluff for the 2019 street resurfacing program in the amount of $540,018.90. Following that approval, 2 additional related work items were initiated. During the May 5th, 2018 Village Finance Committee meeting, the committee approved an additional $25,000 authorization of expenditures for the construction of a storm sewer in the Simpson Alley to be completed with the street resurfacing program. And during construction, the village requested the contractor repair a sinking storm sewer inlet in the driveway of Pasquazy Home and Gardens, which was an additional $11,000. This additional work raised the final value of the contract approximately $36,000 more than the originally approved amount, which could be funded through the contingency fund. In accordance with the village purchasing policy, a change order of this amount requires the approval of the village board. The village engineer recommends the village board approve the change order to the construction contract with the contractor for the increase in scope during the FY 2019 street resurfacing program. Any comments or questions for the village engineer?
One of the things in here that I asked Drew about is to repair a sinking storm sewer inlet in the driveway of Pasquazy Home and Gardens. So we determined, or Drew advised, that that was in the right-of-way and not on Pasquazy's property.
Okay, good point. Anything else?
And that is in the right of way, yes.
Say that again?
That is in the, it's actually in the street, right at their driveway meets the street.
Okay, thank you. So not even right-of-way, it's in the street.
It's all right away.
Okay,
Yeah.
roll call.
Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Ankman? Aye. Trustee Dewar?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
A resolution authorizing the execution of a construction contract with Schroeder Asphalt Services for the villages of Lake Bluff's FY 2020 street improvement program. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Dewart,
I'll second.
and second by Mr. Grenier. Village of Lake Bluff partner with the City of Lake Forest to jointly bid the FY 2020 roadway improvement program. The village's scope of work includes street resurfacing, street patching, and resurfacing of the main portion of the train station parking lot. Past practices dictated a joint effort because it is believed that a larger contract will result in lower unit prices for the work to be performed. 3 bids were received for the project, and the lowest bid for the joint project was submitted by Schroeder Asphalt Services of Huntley, Illinois, with the amount attributable to Lake Bluff's portion of the work at the price of $636,366.30. A comparison to the unit prices the village received for the FY 2019 street resurfacing program shows the prices of the currently bid are approximately 11% higher than the prior year. I think that goes with your contract. Who mentioned something that the cement was going up? Somebody did. Oh, well. The village's proposed 2020 budget includes a total of $700,000 for the street resurfacing, street patching, and train station resurfacing projects, which will be adequate to fund all related activities, including the construction, engineering, and design engineering for the FY 2021 project. Since Schroeder Asphalt Services has performed similar work in other communities and has proven to be capable of completing the work, the village engineer is recommending the village board award the contract to Schroeder Asphalt Services for the amount of $636,366.30. Any comments and things to the, for the village engineer?
Maybe walk us through what is going to be required to repave the train station lot, how long it's going to take.
Yeah, we need to work this out, the final details with the contractor, now that we have one. But we put in the contract that they could close it for 2 consecutive weekdays, which would be to strip off the existing asphalt and put the first layer back on and put some temporary markings on it. And then a 3rd weekday to put the final asphalt layer on and permanent marking. So that would be a 3rd day, not consecutive to the first 2, is how I envision it now. We talked a little bit with the school district about using the middle school parking lot during those days. So we're gonna try to coordinate with the school, make sure they have no events in the times that we're shutting this down. Public notice will be key, obviously, because it'll be weather dependent. So we'll have to pick dates, and then if the weather goes bad, we're gonna have to move it.
We know.
So we'll have to get some signage up in advance at the train station, and we'll talk internally how to do that, so we can change it if we need to push it back due to weather.
Did you consider splitting it in half?
We did. We considered doing it in the weekends and splitting it in half.
Right.
That would essentially double the amount of time it would take, days of disruption. And it would also drive the costs up, I believe, at least $20,000, maybe, 20 to 40,000, depending on how they bid it. But to make them piecemeal to work more and bring the equipment in twice, I think would have driven prices up quite a bit. We actually got very good, better than expected prices on the train lot work, I think, because we agreed to allow them to use weekdays.
The one point that Drew raised, and maybe it wasn't obvious to me until he raised it, it probably should have been, was that, people have a choice of using a different train station, maybe Westlake Forest or Eastlake Forest or
Yeah,
North Chicago.
definitely, if you're gonna take the north line of the Metro, you would use the East Lake Forest one.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be the best, because this is
Or
a
North
total.
Chicago, there's usually.
Yeah, there's
parking up
usually plenty, I'll really tell you, there's usually plenty of parking in North Chicago.
Especially after school's out, the
Yeah.
school portion of the
Right.
Lake Forest UP lot would be available for commuters, the high
We'll
school
do it when
part.
school's out of session.
Pardon?
We will do it when school's out of
Yeah,
session, sometime
yeah.
before the
And if we can
15th.
coordinate with the middle school, we can say, hey, you can go here for free, and yet there's a crossing,
Yeah.
so.
On behalf of my fellow residents on Park Lane, we thank you. Second thing, it's interesting, I just heard some comments about this today, and I thought I should ask this question, and it's not specific to the asphalt per se, but what plans do we have, particularly in light of the onslaught of all the cracking we've had, for crack sealing? We've done some of that in the past, and at least looking at our street, it certainly seems to have helped to kind of mitigate some of the damage. Will we be expanding the use of crack sealing elsewhere in the village, at least for some repairs as well as proactives?
Yes, that's timely that you would ask. I was talking, we have a contract with a crack sealing company that we jumped onto the MPI bid last summer, and we ended up at the end of that line because we jumped onto an existing contract. So our contract, which I think you guys approved in July, if I remember correctly, is good to the end of the fiscal year. So I was emailing him this morning, and he said late March or sometime in early April, they should be here to do that $25,000 worth of crack sealing, which should go a long ways.
Yeah, I was even going, I guess I was going to, the kind of behind the question was, should we be fairly aggressive at that, looking at the next several months to address some of this? I mean, like I say, it's one way to address existing pavement proactively, as well as looking at Green Bay Road, for example, as a way to try to do some fill and things like that, and prevent some further damage until such time as we're able to complete the Green Bay Road,
Recon.
rehab project,
Yeah.
replacement project, because we're going to be spending a lot of time and money filling in a lot of spots on Green Bay as it is.
Yeah, the sweet spot is, the experts say, is streets that have been resurfaced in the past 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So you run out of those streets. You start, it's kind of a waste of money. The street's too far gone.
Yeah.
So we have this 25,000. We'll see how far it goes. I think we have 15 in the proposed budget for next year. And I want to see how far, we haven't done this since I've been here, so I want to see how far this goes, see if we can keep up, what's the right number annually to keep up with that 3 to 5 years? Or maybe we'll do it every 3 years or something, but
Yeah.
at some point, it doesn't pay to keep doing it because your streets are 7 years old and there's too many cracks.
Yeah.
You've already
Yeah.
lost them.
Well, I would just say that, and I guess I probably won't be here, but as a citizen, I'd certainly encourage us, even if there's a need to come back for a change order and to extend this where it's appropriate in the coming months, if we blow through the amount that we've already got budgeted, because at least from what I've seen, it pays big dividends. Anecdotally, I look around and for whatever reason, the state of Illinois has a problem with crack sealing, and consequently, you look around, they just as soon tear the whole road apart as as opposed to putting a little bit of money in to repair cracks before they become a major issue.
It's been a rough winter on our streets.
Yeah.
With all the
Yeah.
freezing and thawing, so
Yeah.
hopefully this will go as far as I thought it would in the fall, but we'll
Yep.
see. We buy it by the pound, so when they hit our contract, they turn the nozzle off and go home. So we'll
Cool.
see how far
Thank
we can
you.
get.
Okay. All right, this is a roll call vote.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Ankman? Aye. Trustee Dewar?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux?
All right, number 15, which is a resolution authorizing the execution of a construction engineering services agreement with Gawalt Hamilton Associates for the Village of Lake Bluff's 2020 roadway improvement program. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Grenier, the second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Meyer. In conjunction with the award of construction contract to Schroeder Asphalt for the village's 2020 roadway improvement projects, the village has solicited a proposal from the professional engineering firm Gawalt Hamilton Association of Vernon Hills for the necessary construction observation, project administration, and materials testing services required for implementation of the roadway resurfacing, metro parking lot resurfacing, and roadway patching work. Payment will be made on an hourly basis to include profit and overhead at the hourly rates as specified in the agreement. Cost not to exceed the amount of $46,155 is specified without additional written authorization from the village. The village's proposed 2020 budget includes funds for the necessary construction observation services. The village engineer recommends adoption of the attached resolution approving the construction engineering services agreement. Any questions for the village engineer? Hearing none, roll call.
Trustee Ankman? Aye. Trustee Dewar?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Number 18, 16, which is a resolution authorizing the payment of a highway bond to the Illinois Department of Transportation for the Lincoln Avenue Storm Sewer Project. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Lemieux. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Grenier. The Village of Lake Bluff's Lincoln Avenue Storm Sewer Project, scheduled to be completed this year, is designed to lessen flooding of the intersection of Lincoln Avenue and Hancock Avenue during moderate to heavy storms. Currently, runoff ponds in the intersection eventually travels through the yards of homes on Lincoln Avenue and Rockland Avenue. Homes in the path of this runoff has been damaged by flooding in the past. The proposed project will install a new, larger storm sewer from the intersection of Lincoln and Hancock to the south and discharge in the open area south of West Scranton Avenue. This portion of West Scranton Avenue is owned by the Illinois Department of Transportation, and the project requires a permit from IDOT for installing the new storm sewer beneath their road. IDOT is requiring a highway bond in the amount of $30,000 from the village prior to issuing a permit for the project. The bond agreement calls for the full amount of the bond to be returned to the village upon completion of the project in accordance with the conditions of the IDOT permit. Any future construction contract for the projects will require the contractor to meet the conditions of the permit to assure the bond will be refunded in whole to the village. Village engineer is recommending the village execute a highway bond agreement and submit $30,000 to IDOT. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I already did that already. I'm sorry, I'm rattling along here. Any questions for the village engineer? Roll call.
Trustee Dewar?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier? Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Ankman? Aye.
Okay, we have an item number 17, which is an ordinance amending section 6-5-3 of the Lake Bluff Municipal Code to prohibit parking on Mountain Avenue. This is first reading consideration, which would be a voice vote. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Dewar, in a second.
Second.
second by Ms. Ankerman. Following discussions of the Committee of the Whole at its 2/11 and 2/23 meetings regarding the recommendations of the Ad hoc Beach Parking Committee, it was the consensus of the Village Board to, 1, observe the Park District's policy changes over the next season, which include elimination of non-resident annual beach memberships, daily non-resident fees increased from $12 to $15 for adults, non-resident annual dog pass increased from $150 to $350 and does not allow owner access to Swim Beach. Elimination of resident business individual beach membership pass. New weekend shelter rental use limited from midnight to 11 p.m. on weekends. From midnight, changed from midnight, sorry. From midnight to 11 p.m. on weekends, and renters are allowed 25 parking places only, which is down from 75. Extensive and sophisticated verification tracking system for residents versus non-residents via technology. Beach attendance starting at 9 a.m., 7 days per week, weather permitting. Qualifications for beach attendant is 17 years of age, which is up from the last year's 15 years of age. First 2 weeks of season, 2 attendants will be on duty, weather permitting. Extensive professional customer service, conflict resolution training for beach attendants and managers. Number 2 on that is correct the village code to include mountain as no parking anytime as currently signed, and correct the signage on the east end of East Prospect, which is the north side of the street, to read as currently noted in the village code, no parking here to corner, rather than currently signed no parking. The attached ordinance corrects the village code with regards to Mountain Avenue and designates it as a no parking area. Do we have any comments or questions regarding this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. The sign on East Prospect has already been changed.
Has it been changed? Okay. Item 17 is an ordinance amending section 6-5-3 of the Lake Bluff. Oh, I just did that. Oh, I had
Excuse
looking
me,
at your other one.
before we move on,
Yes, sir.
given that, does it make sense for us to call for a waive of second
Oh,
reading?
actually, it's a good point. Is that a possibility?
It's been signed that way for a very long time. It shouldn't come as a
Right, and we have
surprise.
actually discussed this
Yeah.
rather
I
ad
would
nauseam.
move, I would move for taking action and without second reading.
Okay, that would make this a roll call vote if we did.
Second the motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion seconded to
Bill Meyer.
waive second reading, which will make this a roll call vote.
Got
So whenever you're ready, ma'am.
I am. Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman? Aye. Trustee Dewart?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, this is second reading approval for an ordinance granting a cable television franchise to Comcast of Illinois. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Ankerman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lemieux. On February 23rd, 2009, the Village Board approved Ordinance 2009-7, which granted a non-exclusive cable television franchise to Comcast. The previous franchise agreement had been negotiated over multiple years from Comcast, the Village, and the City of Lake Forest, and draws from a model agreement template negotiated between Comcast and the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. The term of this agreement was 10 years, and Comcast has requested that both the city and the village renew the franchise agreement under substantially similar terms to those presented in 2009. The city of Lake Forest approved their franchise renewal as presented by Comcast on October 15, 2018. State and federal law constrains the village's option in negotiating franchise agreements. The proposed renewal continues to provide the village a franchise fee of 5% of gross revenues for cable services, but not non-cable services such as internet access, equal to about $115,000 in annual revenue in 2018. Complimentary basic cable service for buildings owned or leased by units of local government, and carriage of the village's public, educational, and governmental access channel. Village Attorney Peter Friedman has now completed his discussions with Comcast and recommends final approval of this agreement in the attached form. All right, any comments or questions regarding this?
Peter, I had a Question on section 3.4, the
Yep.
last sentence that got struck.
Yep.
That
So,
alter the
no.
property owner's rights?
No, so that section deals with, our right-of-way ordinance technically governs what happens if they cause damage while in the
Okay.
right-of-way. This extends that to say our right-of-way ordinance, whatever our right-of-way ordinance says about restoration will apply if they cause damage to the adjacent private property. The sentence that was removed said, nothing in this section or that provision will be interpreted to limit the rights of private property owners to go after Comcast for damages caused, that nothing in here does, so eliminating that does nothing. It's just Comcast
okay.
policy not to create third-party beneficiaries in these, so I didn't have a problem deleting it.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Ankman? Aye. Trustee Dewart?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our trustees report tonight. Anybody? All righty, we do not have executive session this evening, so I would be happy to accept a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
So moved, Mr. Meyer. Do I have a
Second.
second? And second by Mr. Lemieux. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.